This is Beverly.
Helen Knoll, retired U.S. Air Force, has a family history of service. Her uncle Marvin served during World War I. A few years ago, she decided to dig deeper, beyond the family photos, to learn more.
Marvin and Chris had 7 children, and after 7 children, 4 of them passed away.
Helen discovered something about her family, those unexplained deaths, that shook her faith in the government that she served for 24 years.
When I began to read the information that I received on the archives from the Rosenwald Fund, I couldn't believe it.
Helen connected the dots of the Rosenwald Fund syphilis study to her family tree in Tennessee. The government-backed study, much like the Tuskegee experiment, targeted blacks to learn if they reacted differently than whites when exposed to syphilis, a sexually transmitted disease.
But the reality is that blacks have been probed, prodded, experimented on for almost 400 years in this country. It's not just that one experiment.
And they believed that science backed up their prejudice, that African Americans were inferior or of a different species or different than whites.
Dr. Charles Ford and Dr. Newby Alexander are historians at Norfolk State University.
Because it was focused on black men, but the wives of many of these men became infected with syphilis, and their children in terms of actually contracting congenital syphilis.
Helen believes the family disease, as her relatives call it, has passed through the generations and picked them off one by one.
Watching your family members die off like that and not knowing the true cause of death. I don't understand how people could do that and sleep at night.
As a youngster, Helen remembers doctors involved in the experiment making house calls. Blacks living in the rural South welcomed the opportunity to receive health care, or what they thought was health care. Helen believes her Uncle Marvin received high doses of mercury shots long after penicillin was known to be the more effective treatment.
One day I walked in, just out of the blue, and the doctor was shooting him with this long needle, had a long needle in his hand and was giving him a shot.
Michael Newman is an expert on how the body reacts to high doses of mercury.
General neurological issues, kidney failure, hypertension, a whole suite of things.
Fisk University archives document how the Public Health Service budgeted and treated the so-called Negro population in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Really, a doctor's effort is to do no harm. And certainly in this situation, they were doing harm, and certainly after a certain point, they knew they were doing harm.
Helen believes the death certificates of her family members reveal how chronic brain damage and circulatory failure and a host of other chronic health issues were passed down to the children whose parents were part of the experiment. Dr. Newby Alexander agrees the lethal legacy affected multiple generations.
Absolutely. If you consider that congenital syphilis impacts both your heart and your brain.
Helen believes the impact of the experiment on her family ended with the death of her cousin 4 years ago, but the emotional damage remains.
She was the last?
Yes. Beverly died in October of 2008. People are still searching for answers and not fully understanding that our family was a part of an experiment.
More than 30,000 blacks were part of the government-backed Tuskegee and Rosenwald experiments in at least 5 southern states. And according to the Fisk archives, the University of Virginia was actively involved. Some of those experiments didn't end until the year 1972. To learn more about Helen's story, log on to WTKR.com under Seen on News Channel 3. Barbara Sierra, News Channel 3.